Welcome to the Hyperpolyglot Activist, Learn Languages, Make a Difference. My name is Dr. Carlos Yebra Lopez, and today we're going to talk about an under-discussed phenomenon called language fatigue. Now, what is language fatigue and why is it relevant? The question we're asking ourselves here is how draining is it to interact, to communicate in another language? I'm going to tackle 4 topics. First, intercultural encounters. What are they and how do they lead to? Second, negative feelings such as fatigue. Then, how do those feelings affect our interpretive judgments? And what is the relevance of trying to understand language fatigue in this context? So, intercultural encounters. What are those? Intercultural encounters involve culture and language differences, and these differences can cause participants to experience negative feelings. Now, this is particularly the case if those encounters are taking place between people from different countries where at least one of those participants has to function in a language that is not the first language of that person. And here, English is often adopted because it's the foremost lingua franca in our time, over which their mastery is partial and in which they may not feel entirely comfortable and confident. In other words, in a situation where we're using a language that is not our first language and our mastery of that language is not that high. Language fatigue may occur even if participants are functioning in their first language, as long as that language is not the first one for other participants. Say, for instance, your first language is French, and you're talking to a person that does not have a complete mastery of French, so that he or she struggles with some expressions, words, etc. As a result, you're going to have to make much more effort to understand that person, and you have to be much more careful with the kind of words and pronunciation you use to accommodate that to the other person. As a result, you may experience some sort of language fatigue, even though you're using your first language. Then, this may lead to negative feelings. Functioning in a language that is not our first one often has a significant impact in people's feelings, or using our first language with people for whom that language is not their first one. Now, in the scholarly literature, the most researched feeling in this sense is that of anxiety, understood as the stress or discomfort experienced when communicating in another language. And as part of this anxiety, apprehension has been researched, fear of negative social evaluation has been studied, test anxiety has been explored. However, a less studied phenomenon is the fact that operating in another language tends to be more draining than doing the same thing in our first language. In other words, language fatigue is an understudied phenomenon. And this in turn leads to negative interpretive judgments. How so? Well, according to recent psychological theories, human beings operate on the basis of 2 different systems of thinking, System 1 and System 2. System 1 has to do with automatic, instinctive, emotional thinking, whereas System 2 has to do with conscious, reflective, rational thinking. Most of the decisions and thinking that we incur throughout our lives have to do with System 1. They are filtered, processed via System 1, and these are all snap decisions. Only in those cases that require extensive cognitive load do we engage in System 2 at all. And it makes sense. We simply cannot afford to overthink our reality before acting. So most of our decisions, as I said, are filtered via System 1. Now, in intercultural encounters, this changes. Intercultural encounters, by definition, imply cultural and language differences that oftentimes we're not used to. Consequently, this creates a so-called hostile environment that forces us to evaluate, assess, and rethink the reality that is in front of us. And as a result, we're more likely to engage in system two. We're more likely to take our time to examine the situation and think critically and consciously about it. However, when fatigue kicks in, when we're tired, drained, used up, what happens is a process of substitution. That means a psychological tendency to make subconscious and automatic decisions rather than more conscious and careful interpretations. So the idea is that the situation warrants a slow, critical, rational, reflective thinking, but because we are tired of using a language other than our first one for a protracted period of time, we switch from system two to system one. And instead of asking ourselves complex questions, we resort to simplified questions. Instead of asking ourselves, what do I think about the person I have in front of me? We ask ourselves, how do I feel right now? What is my mood right now? And if the answer to that is negative, then that's the end of our thinking. So language fatigue makes us more prone to have negative feelings towards people who create these hostile environments for our thinking. Think about this. Has this ever happened to you? Were you ever, say, in a language learning class where you were tired of using the target language for 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, maybe 5, 8 hours, and it got to a point where you said to yourself, well, listen, I'm too tired to keep using the target language. I would rather end the event or the conversation or the situation here. I would rather make things easier for me because I am too tired to go into the intricacies of the questions that are being posed to me at a reflective, rational level. That's what the substitution bias is all about. And why is this relevant? Well, first, because language fatigue affects many intercultural situations. And second, because by studying, by analyzing this phenomenon, we build awareness as to the role that feelings play in intercultural encounters. And here, Don Snow puts forward the idea of a mental checklist. So imagine that next time you have one of these intercultural encounters that leads to negative feelings of the sort of language fatigue, which may or may not have an impact on your interpretive judgments. In order to prevent that negative impact on your judgment, ask yourself these questions. First, did something the other person did or said catch me by surprise and make me feel a little uncomfortable? And then, is the fact that I'm speaking a different language or this person is speaking it causing me anxiety or fatigue? And by making yourself these questions, you become more aware of the impact that language fatigue may be having on your interpretive judgments. And as a result, you're going to be more aware and more fair towards the other person in this intercultural encounter. That's all from me. Thank you very much for watching this video. I'm sure you have experienced language fatigue situations in the past, even if you haven't conceptualized it as such back then. And I will look forward to you sharing those stories in the comment section down below. And as always, thanks for watching.